Throughout history, there have been many people who've pushed themselves to the absolute limits and fought tooth and nail to achieve something they truly believed in. But out of all of them, I would say Touhou fans have to be the most dedicated group of people to ever exist. Look, I don't even know that much about the franchise myself, but you gotta hand it to them. The sky's the limit when it comes to what lengths they will go to show off their passion. I've seen dudes perfectly play songs from these games by pressing buttons on a phone. There are entire fan-made anime series. One music video got so popular, it appeared on fucking CNN. And don't even get me started on games. We could be here for hours and only just scratch the surface. Touhou is such a widespread franchise that I think there should be some kind of scientific term for realizing that something you enjoyed in the past was actually a reference to it the entire time. It's happened to me a lot. There's shit I've laughed at online for years without knowing it was Touhou related, like the old classic, Ronald McDonald Insanity. My friends and I ate that shit up back in 2008 and never bothered to read the description or look further into it. With such a wide array of characters and ideas to work with, along with the fact that series creator Zune is very encouraging of fan works, I guess it's no surprise that the franchise is still going strong today and grows ever more popular by the second. Now, I might be a little biased here, considering the kind of games I play, but there is one Touhou fan game in particular that appeals to me the most, and I don't think enough people are talking about it. Released in September 2023, Touhou Artificial Dream in Arcadia is a love letter to classic Shin Megami Tensei. I'm talking early mainline Super Famicom era shit. The game follows Sumireko Usami, a high schooler who can visit the fantasy world of Gensokyo in her dreams. Armed with her smartphone and whatever weapons she can scrounge up, Sumireko finds herself in the middle of a mysterious conspiracy as an army of strange clones of Gensokyo's residents arrive, along with a massive, towering monolith. As the only one capable of communicating with and fighting alongside the creatures, it's up to you to solve this incident and set things right. With a huge selection of well-crafted first-person dungeons, over 100 recruitable yokai and demons, a killer soundtrack that sounds true to the games it was based on, and amazing art, Artificial Dream in Arcadia may well be the best Shin Megami Tensei game in years, frankly, far surpassing a lot of Atlus's recent work. I don't say this lightly. If you're a fan of early mainline SMT, or games like Soul Hackers or the first Devil Summoner, or maybe you've found yourself wanting to play a more modernized version of those titles, turn this video off right now and go play it. You will not regret it. Some of you may be thinking, Marshall, this sounds cool and all, but if I don't know a damn thing about Touhou, is this game really gonna be something for me? I thought the exact same thing before I played it, and honestly, I think knowing nothing about Touhou makes this game better. While the game does reward Touhou fans by featuring characters and locations familiar to that franchise, no prior knowledge is required. You can jump right in, regardless of your experience. Think of it like this. Imagine if Atlus announced a brand new Shin Megami Tensei game styled after their old hits, and on top of that, the game would have an entire fresh roster of demons, and the game would have some new mechanics to spice things up. A lot of people would probably lose their shit, but that's pretty much what this game is, minus the official Atlus part. A game like this honestly feels like it was sorta made for me in a way. A chance to feel unfamiliar with SMT again and fall in love with the tense battles and ball-bustingly difficult dungeons one more time. We have to talk about this, and you know how it goes. We're gonna take an in-depth look at Artificial Dream in Arcadia, going on a grand tour of Gensokyo, fighting our way through every dungeon and meeting a huge variety of characters along the way. I'm gonna bring you all the way through the main game and post-game, as well as the vast majority of the side content. This will be a very spoiler-heavy video, so use it as you see fit, whether that's to preview parts of the game, follow along with your own playthrough, or what have you. For the Touhou veterans out there, This is my first exposure to most parts of this universe, and as I'm sure you already know, there's a lot of crazy shit going on in here. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the developer of this game, Potemkin, for permission to make this video and show all this off. It's not often that I cover a recent game on the channel, but not all treasure has to be buried before we find it. With that, let's get to it. Start up a new game and we get a quick introduction to the world of Gensokyo, a place isolated from the outside world, where yokai and mythical creatures roam freely and magic and religion play an active role in day-to-day life. Then, we find ourselves at Hakurei's shrine, in the middle of a conversation with none other than Reimu Hakurei herself, the main protagonist of the Touhou series. I may not be much of a Touhou guy yet, but I definitely recognize Reimu. If you're also unfamiliar with the series, it may surprise you to learn that we're not playing as the typical big hero in this game. Sumireko is in the middle of showing her smartphone to Reimu, who seems pretty mystified by such a device and claims that it sounds more like magic than technology. Just as we're about to explain to her how cat pictures work, we're interrupted by the magician Marisa Kirisame, who hurriedly enters the shrine and asks for our help. A yokai has stolen some books from one of her friends, and she needs some backup. Reimu seems absolutely uninterested and wants nothing to do with this little charade. I guess big shots like her don't have time for small fry shit like this. And that means the task falls on us. Marisa whisks us away to a cave, and it's already time for an introductory dungeon. Look at this place, and listen to this music. I told you, man, if you're like me, you already feel right at home here. Alright, let me walk you through the basic mechanics. There's a lot of interesting stuff this game throws at you, and it goes a little deeper than you might expect. Not all of these will be relevant for this very first dungeon because you kinda get eased into everything, but we'll cover it all here just to be thorough. Let's start off with exploration. Much of this game is focused on first-person dungeon crawling. You're going to be going through a whole slew of dangerous places, seeking out treasure, bosses, and most importantly, the exit. As you make your way around each stage, you'll gradually fill up your map, which can be referenced at any time with a quick press of a button. At any point, you can bring up a menu that lets you turn on your phone, use your party members' skills, use or equip an item, check out your team's stats and move lists, configure game options, and finally, fully heal your team with one button press instead of manually casting your spells. For the most part, this is pretty standard dungeon crawler stuff, with a clear outlier being your phone. Your phone is where you'll go to summon recruited party members to your active squad once you've gone out and gathered some. You'll notice in the top left of the screen, above our money counter, we have a battery meter. This is essentially magnetite from Shin Megami Tensei. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, here's how it works in this game. Your active party consists of you and up to 3 other allies. If you have allies active, for every step you take, you'll drain a portion of your battery. Depending on how many allies you have active and how strong they are, this can range from fractions of a percent to over 1% per step. What this forces you to do is measure how dependent you are on your allies for any given situation. Do you need to roll around with a beefed out death squad, or can you make it through early parts of a dungeon with a relatively weaker team? The choice is yours, and it's a balancing act throughout the game that I really enjoyed. I know some SMT fans don't really like magnetite mechanics. Personally, I love this kind of thing because it means you have to be mindful of how you carry out each of your expeditions into the unknown. When your resources are running low and every step counts, that's when these games are at their best, in my opinion. If your battery runs out, you won't be able to see your map or summon any allies. This can be a death sentence if you're really lost, but fortunately, the game offers plenty of ways around these punishments if you're having trouble. You can upgrade your phone to have a stronger battery, you can make it so that your active allies stay active even if your battery dies, and you can even find or purchase consumable backup batteries that recharge you a little bit. For right now, Marisa doesn't drain your battery, and you won't have to worry about it, but it won't be long before it becomes a vital part of your planning. A key part of most dungeons that you'll want to seek out are healing rooms and anomalies. In healing rooms, you can revive fallen party members and patch up your team, as well as purchase supplies for dungeon crawling. Anomalies are portals where you can have Sumireko wake up and return to the real world briefly, allowing you to save your game and charge your phone. Later on, you'll also unlock the ability to teleport between discovered anomalies if you want to revisit a particular dungeon or get to another part of the world quicker. These will be your lifeline throughout the game, particularly for saving, which cannot be done in the middle of a stage unless you have a consumable item called a burner phone. The original Devil Summoner actually has a mechanic pretty much just like this, and it reminds me of Strange Journey a bit too. As you wander around, you'll soon have your first random encounter. The battle system in this game is a lot of fun. Check it out. Your options are to attack, use a skill, defend, use an item, pull out your phone, or try and run away. Attacking lets us choose between swinging with a melee weapon or firing a gun if you have one. Skills brings up a list of spells and abilities for each character. Just like in SMT, elemental weaknesses and resistances play a heavy role in this game's combat, as do buff and debuff spells, so you'll have to experiment with each opponent and find what works best. While the spells have different names than SMT, the idea is basically the same. You have fire, ice, electric, force, and mind elemental spells, as well as physical and pierce skills. When it comes to support, naturally you have healing, as well as ways to boost your attack, defense, and evasion, and lower that of your opponents. Hitting enemy weaknesses is really important because the more you do this, the higher your SP bar goes. That's this little colored meter in the middle of the screen. This shit can make or break battles. If you build up SP, you can use a variety of unlockable special abilities. These are kinda like commander skills from Strange Journey Redux, or the Magatsuhi skills from Shin Megami Tensei 5. You can use these special abilities once per turn, provided you have the SP to do it, and the effects can range from casting a free buff or debuff spell, to preventing the enemy from doing anything for a single turn, to fully healing your team, and more. There's even an analyze function that lets you view enemy stats and elemental affinities. If an enemy hits your weakness, you can lose SP. This can potentially cost you a battle depending on how much you needed that special skill. Now, there are a lot of ways to protect your weaknesses. If you have a unit defend, it shrugs off most of the negative effects from being hit with a nasty attack. Your party also uses a row system, so the top 2 team members are in the front row and are more likely to be hit, while the bottom 2 hang out in the back row and seem to get a bit more protection at the cost of doing slightly less damage. If you know one of your allies is vulnerable to an enemy attack, just have them hang out in the back for a bit to mitigate some of the risk. Sumireko can even modify her own strengths and weaknesses, which I'll talk about pretty soon. Hitting weaknesses, protecting your own, and racking up SP brings us to the most important SP skill in the game, usable via our phone: the ability to hijack an enemy. After all that talk about team members and batteries, I bet you were wondering how getting allies works. So right now, we're just fighting run-of-the-mill yokai, but once we're out of this tutorial, we'll be going up against sleepers, strange digital clones of Gensokyo's residents that we can turn to our side with our technology. You can call hijacking this game's negotiation system. If there's a sleeper you want to recruit, provided you have enough SP, you just click the hijack button and you'll be taken to a quick bullet hell minigame where Sumireko faces off against her opponent. This is where the Touhou side of things comes into play. Your character is on the left side of the screen, and you just gotta blast away at the enemy until they go down, dodging patterns of bullets all the while. These segments are honestly a lot of fun because they're skill-based, unlike the random negotiations in Mega 10. While these might look overwhelming to someone who's never played a bullet hell shooter before, take it from me, it's not so bad. Your hitbox is very forgiving. Unless a shot touches like the absolute dead center of your character, you're fine. And you can take a couple of hits before you fail the minigame. If you're still having trouble, all you have to do is wear down the enemy in normal combat a little bit, and the minigame gets a lot easier. The lower an enemy's health goes, the slower and less frequently the bullets fly. And if you're still not happy and you just don't want to do any shooting at all, well, get this. You can actually just turn it off and use a dice roll based on your intelligence and luck stats, much like the old Megaten games. I honestly couldn't believe that. I personally don't recommend it because the shooting segments are a fun part of the game, but the fact that the dev was thoughtful enough to include that as an option is really cool. When you complete a hijack, you can have the sleeper join your team, or convert it into money or an item. Recruited sleepers do level up and gain experience as you fight, but they don't gain any new moves. They also seem to require a lot more experience than you do to level up after a while, so running with the same party for multiple dungeons can lead to your combat capability gradually worsening as you go on. There are a few things we can do to beef up our party. Another important thing you'll come across as you explore are computer terminals. These are a bit more rare than anomalies in healing rooms. Terminals are where all the magic happens when it comes to party setup, and this game offers you a lot of flexibility. For starters, this game has fusion. Take two sleepers and fuse them together to make a different one. Classic Megaten shit. Now, this game does mix things up a bit from the usual formula. Let's say you have a sleeper you really like, a favorite character, or just someone that's been really working well for you, and you want to keep using them throughout the game. With skill transfer, what you can do is take skills you want from other sleepers you've recruited and slap them onto your favorite. The one you take skills from does get deleted in the process, but it's pretty easy to just go hijack them again, or if you've saved them in the database, you can just resummon them for a fee. Now let's say you want to boost an ally's stats without grinding. Well, you can do that too. Use the sacrifice function, and you can have one sleeper absorb another for a huge chunk of XP. While Sumireko is capable of nabbing skills from sleepers, she can't use this sacrifice function, so it's strictly for your allies. But she does get a unique ability of her own here at the terminal to compensate for it. With affinity transfer, you can modify Sumireko's strengths and weaknesses. Maybe you find a sleeper strong against fire. If your Sumireko is currently weak to fire and you're up against a boss that's burning your ass off, just do an affinity transfer. The same rules apply. You lose the ally but gain their power. I love how many options you're given to build up your team, and I think this all hammers home just how important hijacks are. It's how you get new allies, it's how you can get a lot of money, and it all ends up benefiting you later when it comes time to boost your stats, switch up your moves, and prepare for a boss. To close out this little gameplay crash course, let's take a look at stats for just a minute. It's not going to take very long before you get your first level up, and I think it's worth going over how they work because each of our attributes are actually really useful. Each time Sumireko gains a level, you get 3 skill points, which can be allocated however you like between strength, magic, vitality, intelligence, agility, and luck. Strength mostly affects your physical damage and boosts your HP a bit. Magic basically mirrors that. It affects your magic damage and boosts your MP. On the flip side, vitality and intelligence are defensive stats. Leveling vitality provides a substantial increase to your HP and increases your physical defense, while intelligence gives you much more MP and helps you resist magic better. Agility is extremely important because it influences turn order, and luck is also surprisingly useful, making you a little bit stronger all around and helping you inflict status ailments. All these sound good, right? Well, that's because they are. Any build can work, and you do unlock a way to respec your character if you're not happy with your choices. My personal suggestion is to make a focused build. Be really good at something, like healing or raw damage, instead of kind of good at everything. And don't neglect that agility stat, because going first in a battle can take you really far. Alright, I think that about does it for core mechanics. I know that was a lot, and I'll introduce a few more things later as we come to them, but if nothing else, I hope this all illustrates to you one key point that lies at the heart of this game. It gets balance right. Whether it's managing your phone battery, building up a powerful team, facing off against enemies in the bullet hell hijacks, or even just leveling up your character. It's all set up so that your obstacles can be conquered, your playthrough can be unique to you, and it's fair. Don't get me wrong, this game has some dick twister dungeons and quite a few hard boss fights, but even in its most challenging moments, it never really feels like bullshit. In a genre known for being unforgiving, I'd say this game feels about as perfect as you can get. Hell, even the encounter rate for battles feels pretty good. Not too few fights, but not too many either. All around, good stuff. So now that we got our ass on straight and you have an idea of what we're working with, let's go see if we can track down those books with Marisa. As you'd expect, this first dungeon isn't a crazy challenge. You'll encounter low-level yokai, and it's pretty hard to get yourself in any real trouble. You start off the game with a low-level healing spell, so if you get too banged up, be sure to make use of that. If you die, you lose a chunk of XP, and we want to try and avoid that early on in the game. Make an effort to thoroughly loot the place and fill out your map. You can pick up quite a few free goodies in here, like health restoring items, a gun, and a melee weapon. If you explore literally every tile in a dungeon, you will get awarded a stack of money, so there's a little incentive if you're feeling up to it. When you reach the end of the cave, Marisa warns that the book thief is just ahead. Lock and load, and it's time for our first boss fight. This is Tokiko, a little winged creature that doesn't really put up much of a fight. She can hit you with some attack magic that stings a bit, but she's weak to guns, so fire away with Sumireko and have Marisa provide backup damage, healing as necessary. She goes down without much trouble, and Marisa asks if we had a fun time. Funnily enough, we can only respond in the negative, making me wonder if maybe every Touhou character is actually just a huge asshole. Just as we're about to head on back to Hakurei's shrine, something wakes us up in the real world. It's our fucking teacher! And wait just a second. Is this the classroom from the Digital Devil Story anime? Look! It is almost detail for detail the same room. And the teacher looks like Nakajima. I know some of you were thinking, oh, any classroom in Japan could look like this, Marshall, but it is pretty specifically detailed. I'm not crazy, right? Don't answer that. Anyway, Nakajima yells at us for slacking off and sends us home. It's the first day of summer break, and we're gonna spend the entire damn thing in bed exploring evil caves in our sleep. Hit the sack and we're back at the shrine, but this time it's completely empty. Weird. But after taking a little stroll outside, we see something even weirder. An ominous monolith, eerily looming in the distance. Standing at the base of the structure is Marisa again, who warns us to steer clear until the place is confirmed to be safe. She tells us that it just appeared out of nowhere, making no noise whatsoever. At the same time, seemingly mute clones of Gensokyo's residents arrived, and everyone is taken to calling them sleepers. Marisa says this is all shaping up to be Gensokyo's next big incident, and tells us that Reimu is over at the human village, making sure everyone's alright. Somewhat dismissively, we're told not to cause any trouble and to let things play out. Basically, everyone wants us to fuck off and go play in the highway. As Marisa turns away, we get a notification on our phone. It's a text telling us to take a picture of a nuclear reactor, along with a mysterious download link. If Gensokyo has a terrorism watch list, we're probably on it now. We decide to ask Marisa about nuclear reactors, you know, as one does, and she tells us that we can find one down in the underworld. At first, I thought she was just telling me to go to hell, but she's serious. They really do keep a nuclear reactor down there, so I guess we're gonna have to follow along with this bizarre text and go snap a photo of it. From here, we're set free into the big wide world. Most paths lead to dungeons that come later and are blocked off for now, but we can take a little walk to the southwest and hit up a supply shop if you're interested. The shopkeeper doesn't sell much, but you can pick up some baseline equipment here, as well as an extremely expensive rocket launcher. Might want to start saving up some pennies for that one now. If we venture to the southeast, we're accosted by Nitori, this Kappa girl that tells us she was spying on our conversation with Marisa. It turns out she has a phone too and got the same message we did, but she's having issues downloading the attached app. When Nitori pulls her phone out, it's some big-ass brick thing from 1937, so unfortunately, she's not gonna be our summoner buddy or anything like that. Nitori swipes our phone out of our hands and then runs away, eventually coming back after she's had a chance to mess around with our copy of the app. This is where you officially gain access to the SP meter, as well as the ability to hijack sleepers. If we aren't going to be getting much help from any of Gensokyo's actual residents, we'll have to sway their clones to our side instead. Continue just a bit further and you'll see a crack in the ground. This is the entrance to the underworld. Before we get to the real deal, you will have to pass through a short cave. In here is where you'll face off against your very first sleeper, Kisume, this little bastard in a bucket. I didn't realize it at the time, but this was the beginning of an eternal friendship, tempered in blood and steel. See, I was so fascinated by this thing that I had to do some research. I mean, look at her. When you search up Kisume, you get shitloads of fan art, so I was thinking, this must be a really important character. And I couldn't have been any more wrong. This is Kisume's bio on the Touhou wiki. It's one fucking sentence. The funniest part is, not only is she a mid-boss in one game and limited to a cameo appearance in other games, but the only information available about her personality is a quote from Zune saying that she would probably chop your head off. What the fuck? Needless to say, I immediately recruited Kisume and decided I'd keep her around for a while, unaware that I had just formed a contract with the most dangerous creature that ever lived. Aside from that revelation, not much goes on in this little cave, aside from a few words of advice about stats and game mechanics from Nitori. When we finally touch down in the land of the dead, a few destinations lie before us. To the east is a bridge leading to a city known as the former capital. Parsi, the guardian of the bridge, is really surprised to see a human down here and says we're looking in the wrong place if we want to see a nuclear reactor. Guess we'll have to save the former capital for later. Head north instead and you'll reach a grand stone staircase leading to the Palace of the Earth Spirits. When we step inside, we're snatched up by a cat girl named Orin, who insists that we go and see her master, Lady Satori. With no choice in the matter, we're dragged deeper into the dungeon and plop down on the floor in Satori's office. Just like Parsi, she's surprised to see a live human down in the underworld. Satori seems to believe we have something to do with the appearance of the monolith on the surface. She doesn't understand why we need to take a selfie with a nuclear reactor, but in the spirit of helping us solve the mystery, offers us some assistance in the form of knowledge. She reveals that not only are the sleepers incapable of speaking, they're apparently mindless on top of that, and go through the motions of how their real selves would act with no thoughts whatsoever. If we ask Satori why they attack us, she tells us that since sleepers are acting like their real selves, it must mean that nobody really likes us that much. Okay, so even down here, everyone wants to act like a wise ass. Of course, the cherry on top of Satori's assistance is that if you flat out ask her to help you solve the case, she just says no and the game moves on. Nice. Well, with not much left to say, Satori tells us the reactor is in a place called the Remains of Blazing Hell. If we want to get there, we have to unlock the gate keeping it sealed off. And to do that, we're going to have to find 4 locks hidden across the palace. Let's get to it. You know what? I think this is actually one of the best stages in the game. It's the perfect playground to master the basics and really get used to all of the mechanics at your disposal. The Palace of the Earth Spirits pulls no punches. It's fairly sizable, and right off the bat, you're treated with a variety of obstacles to deal with. Here's how it works. This palace consists of a big main floor and 4 towers. There's a lock in each tower, and all of them except one have some kind of fucked up gimmick that you have to put up with. One tower is full of tiles that can poison you. You either have to treat this with an antidote, find a spell that can do it, or try and survive long enough to get back to the healing room on the main floor. Another tower has tiles that heavily drain your battery as you walk through them. There are spare batteries you can find that'll help you out with this, but if you let your phone die and you aren't prepared for it, you're probably gonna die too. Losing your battery is most dangerous in early game stages like this, where you haven't yet purchased the ability to keep your allies active regardless of charge level. Throughout the last tower, your phone just doesn't work throughout most of it, meaning you can't see your map. This is marginally better than having the battery drained because you can still have help from your friends, but the no map thing can be tricky. Keep an eye on your surroundings and you can do it. These towers provide the bulk of the challenge, but there are a couple of points of particular interest on the main floor worth seeking out. First up, we got a terminal on the western side. Definitely a smart idea to pick up some sleepers, fuse if you can, and start moving skills on a Sumireko if anything catches your eye. Definitely purchase any special moves you can afford, like the defense or evasion buffs. Next, there's a weird empty room almost in the direct center of the map. Its purpose isn't immediately apparent, but keep this in the back of your mind for a while. We'll swing by here again later. Once you've found all 4 locks, the gates to hell, or should I say, the remains of hell, are now open. You can find the entrance at the north end of the main floor. Before heading down here, I'd suggest setting yourself up with a full party for what's to come. If you got the money for it, it might also be worth picking up a burner phone so you can save your game right outside the boss door. You're not always warned of a boss being nearby, but after you've cleared a big chunk of a dungeon, you can kind of feel it coming. When I stepped in here, it was like my sleeper agent activation code went off. I immediately just started pulling all the copper wire out of nearby electronic devices. This shit looks just like the Rotting Sea of Flames. You guessed it, from Digital Devil's Story. I never thought I'd have to be in here again. I'm not saying 2 different first-person dungeon crawlers can't both have a fire level without it being a reference of some sort, but come on, this game's already based on SMT. That's exactly what this place is. I'm starting to think the cosmic curse is real. Dude, I swear to God, if there's a Minotaur in here, we're fucking done. This dungeon is merciful enough to not hurt you with every step you take, unlike its Digital Devil's Story counterpart, but that doesn't mean it's easy. It's a smaller dungeon than the Palace of the Air Spirits, and there aren't any gimmick tiles to worry about in here, but it makes up for it by ramping up the challenge on the battles. This is why I suggest a strong party. You're going to be going up against bigger groups, with plenty of opponents that have powerful physical attacks. You'll want to hijack anybody you can manage. In particular, I recommend Yugi, who resists physical and pierce, and has a move called Vision Stab that has a chance to blind an enemy, which naturally fucks up their accuracy. It's not so fun to go against Yugi, but once she's on your side, you'll have a much easier time. As I made my way through this dungeon, I started thinking it'd be kind of funny to use Kisume to kill whoever the boss was at the nuclear reactor. I think a normal person probably would have dumped her by now, but with a few sacrificial fusions, she was stronger than ever, and I saw no reason to give her up. You can find the nuclear reactor in the southeast corner of this level. When we step in, we find that it's guarded by Utsuho, whose job is apparently to regulate the fires of hell. When we tell her we're here to take a selfie, she says we'll make good fuel for the reactor and attacks us. Okay, this boss is kinda like your wake-up call to really lock down weaknesses if you haven't bothered to do that yet. Utsuho loves to attack you with fire spells. On my first attempt, my character was weak to fire. I thought I could brute force it somehow, but you know what they say, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Utsuho scorched me to ashes, and that was that. On my second try, with a fire resistance this time, it obviously went a lot better. It might surprise you to learn that this boss isn't weak to ice, but rather pierce. Our old buddy Yuki can help you with that, and if you blast away with your gun, you should be all set to rack up some SP and throw out some free buffs or healing. With Kisume and a clone of Utsuho providing backup, I was able to turn the tables and finally secure the victory. When Utsuho goes down, we take our long-awaited selfie, and she offers to fly us back to the palace, seemingly a little embarrassed about the fact that she got so fired up over something harmless. From here, you need to go back outside to progress the story, but I hope you didn't forget, there's still that weird empty room to figure out. Head on back there, and this time a teleporter activates, and it brings us to a hidden section of former H.E.L.P. This bonus area is for people that like to wake up at 4 in the morning and put their cocks in a vice grip just to feel something. It's totally optional, but you do miss out on a free piece of gear if you skip it. So it's a teleporter maze, and there are over a dozen teleports. We're not even far into the game yet, and already, they're busting out the scary shit. If it's any consolation, the layout is pretty condensed, so if you take a wrong teleport and have to start over, it doesn't take that long to get back to where you started. If you can reach the end, you have to fight Koishi, who's actually Satori's younger sister. I can only assume they don't get along very well if Satori lives in the palace, and this girl's locked away behind a hell maze. This fight is like your second wake-up call. Utsuho taught you to protect your weaknesses. Koishi teaches you that you need to know your way around buffs. She'll often debuff your evasion and accuracy. If you have no way of either boosting it back up or clearing the debuff altogether, you're likely fucked. And of course, in my infinite stupidity, I came in here without either of those and got my ass handed to me. She debuffed me into oblivion and slapped my tits sideways, and I didn't bring a burner phone, meaning I had to do the entire teleporter maze again. But you know, what can I say? I had it coming. As long as you have a way to counter her debuffs, it's a dead simple fight. Bring her down, and your big reward for going through all of this is the Mask of Hope, a solid piece of equipment that also provides a stat boost to your luck and agility while equipped. Not bad. Welp, crawl your way back out of the palace, and we're free to return to the surface. Honestly, I don't really see much of a reason to come back here ever again, so before we bid the underworld farewell, let's see if we can visit the capital now that our selfie business is taken care of. Revisit that bridge, and this time, instead of politely giving us directions, Parsi decides to beat the shit out of us. Alrighty, as you can see, this took me off guard. I only had Kisume active, but I was still able to get my footing and put up a fight. Parsi uses force magic, she can buff her defense, and she can even heal herself, but she's weak to lightning. As long as you keep up consistent damage every turn, you can do it. The healing might seem like it's undoing all of your work, but it's actually not too hard to outdamage her, meaning it kinda ends up being a wasted move. Once she's done, the city awaits. It's a cute little place, not a whole lot to do here, but you can talk to some of the townsfolk and get a side quest from the real Yugi. It turns out, Parsi attacking people on the bridge is driving away potential tourists to the capital, and if we can do something about it, we'll be rewarded. I guess knocking her out wasn't enough. Your only hint is that you need to distract her, so check this out. You have to give Parsi a burner phone, and then she gets like fucking addicted to social media. I almost want to call this luck-based. You know, you either already have a burner phone on you, and you see the prompt to give it to her, or you just pass by without one and never figure it out. I don't recall seeing anything that points to giving her a phone, so correct me if I'm wrong. It definitely felt like one of those puzzles that only really makes sense in hindsight. Now to be fair, a lot of the early SMT games are pretty cryptic, and this is just an optional mission, so it's not really a complaint. If you can figure it out, Yugi presents you with a steak dinner that is apparently so tough to eat, it causes Sumireko physical pain. This permanently boosts your strength by 3. Hell yeah. Back up in the surface world, we get a text message saying that the Dreamer's Monolith has been opened. Nobody's guarding the entrance this time, so let's waltz on in and give it a look for ourselves. You better get used to seeing this place because you'll be back here a lot. This is kinda like Tartarus from Persona 3, except it was actually designed by a human being, and instead of like 9,000 floors, there's 10. As we progress through the story, we'll gradually unlock more and more of the place until we finally reach the top. This first floor is pretty easy compared to the shit we just went through back at the Underworld. you have an anomaly and a healing station to easily patch yourself up, and the enemies aren't that tough. You can recruit some pretty iconic characters here, like this little fucknut. I always thought her name was Cerno, but in doing some research I found out some people say her name as Chiruno, which is based on how it's spelled in Japanese. After evaluating all available information, I think it was likely intended to be pronounced as Cherno in English. Across a handful of YouTube videos, I heard multiple pronunciations. I feel like if you haven't seen this character before, you're not alive. I used to love watching Gary's Mod shorts, and man, she was all over that shit. Anyway, the gimmick on this floor is that you loop around from one side of the room to the other when you reach the boundaries. What you have to do is strategically loop around from specific spots so you can gain access to the stairs, which can't be reached from the main hallway. It only really takes a couple minutes to figure this out, and that's it. It's one of the smallest stages in the game. When we reach the stairs, we're met with a dead end, along with a new message encouraging us to explore Gensokyo further. On our way out, Reimu confronts us and asks if we had anything to do with the entrance being open. Well, actually we do, but fuck if I'm gonna tell her that. She already seems a little suspicious of us. Reimu decides if we really want to help solve this incident, that we should head to the Scarlet Devil Mansion and look for information in the library there. Marisa is headed over there too, so we might be able to link up with her. From outside the Monolith, walk a short ways to the west and we reach the human village. I love this place. You can heal up here, save your game, there's a terminal, plenty of friendly NPCs. It's a cozy place that becomes a sort of home base for us for the rest of the game. In one of the more prominent buildings in town, we meet Hieda no Akyu, who I think is the nicest character in the entire game. She doesn't try to murder you or imply everybody hates you, she just looks happy and talks to us about the ongoing incident. Akyu says we can reach Scarlet Devil Mansion by heading further west near a place called Misty Lake. Now aside from this, there's actually what appears to be a couple of male characters in some of the houses. They both only want to talk about women, and I was gonna make some kind of comment about how typical that is for a guy, but if you think about it, everyone else in this world is a woman, so it would be pretty hard not to. There's also a girl named Kane that we can gift a school uniform, which in turn provides a permanent boost to our intelligence. Finally, we can visit this town's version of a library. I'm sure it pales in comparison to the Scarlet Devil Mansion, but this is where we can activate yokai grimoires that we find in dungeons. Put simply, grimoires let you modify how the game itself works. I kinda explained some of these earlier. You start off with a few. There's a grimoire that makes the game a lot easier, there's one that makes the game a lot harder, and there's one that lets you swap out the bullet hell hijacks for a dice roll. As you progress, you can find some pretty bizarre shit, like a grimoire that tries to rebalance the game around playing without allies. These are pretty cool if you're the kind of person that likes to replay games in weird ways. I wouldn't personally suggest most of them for a first time playthrough, but you do you. After we bring grimoires here, they can be accessed at any time, at any anomaly, so if you suddenly get the urge to mess around with one, you don't have to walk all the way back to the village to do so. On our way out, Akyu advises that we take the road north from here and says we can always ask her for help if we need it. What a sweet woman. As nice as she is, if you take her advice literally and follow the path straight north, you quickly come to a place called Myoren Temple, where this nun, Byakuren, tries to teach us about Buddhism. When she hears that we're working on solving the mystery of the monolith, she suggests just leaving it alone and learning to coexist with it. Since we're here and able-bodied, Byakuren asks if we venture below the temple and put a stop to a wicked hermit causing trouble with the sleepers. You know, that's really funny. I mean, I wish you could just tell her to learn to coexist with it if she's gonna act like that towards me, but whatever, let's do it. I'm sure whatever's waiting at the Scarlet Devil Mansion won't be easy, so we'd better take every chance we can get to power up a bit. This is a simple cave dungeon. I picked up a sleeper named Miko here, who had some pretty useful abilities like Critical Slash, a physical move that hits the entire enemy team and has a high chance of dealing critical hits. When we reach the end, we find that the real Miko is the wicked hermit we're looking for. Miko says that she's been attacking sleepers because they interrupt her studies. She's interested in our ability to control them and wants to see it in action, challenging us to a fight. This is a boss battle that I honestly should not have won, but for some reason I did. She primarily attacks with electric spells, and she's weak to ice. I was able to consistently hit her weakness with Kisume on the back line, and mostly relied on physical damage with the others. The one thing that makes this fight kinda tricky is Miko's special ability, Cult of Personality. What this does is boost her attack, defense, and evasion if you have any allies that are a lower level than her. Needless to say, unless you have some primo top-of-the-line team, you're gonna need some kind of method of countering that spell, or you'll gradually get overpowered. I beat this fight with only a sliver of health left, and one ally, Letty, who knows a few ice attacks. Kisume and Yugi did put up a good fight, but I let things go on a little too long, and they were starting to run out of MP for spells. You know what? A win's a win. I'll take it. When Miko's done fighting, she says we can go tell Byakuren that she won't be attacking any more sleepers, hoping to be more like us and find a way to command them instead. For our trouble, Byakuren now allows you to reset your skill points and respec your character. This is a really good reward, honestly. As long as you have the cash, you can do this as much as you want. Maybe you've been rolling with a physical attack character and you want to try out magic instead? Well, this would be a good time to do it because the mansion's up next and it's got some challenge. Venture northwest and you'll soon see the lake. A thick fog rolls in, and here we are. When we approach the gates, we're met by Mei Ling, a Chinese yokai who's guarding the place from outsiders. Does she always stand like that, or is she just excited to see me? Mei Ling asks us to say something to prove that we're not a sleeper. For some reason, one of the options is sus amogus. As a teenage girl from the real world, I guess this tells us what kind of person Sumireko is. Obviously, I went with that. Unfortunately, Mei Ling thinks we're trying to cast some kind of evil spell at her and immediately attacks us. You know, this actually happened to a friend of mine once. Mei Ling likes to buff her attack and uses hard-hitting physical moves like Focus Punch. When I was fighting her, she would usually buff and then take a swing at me every round, which was a pretty easy pattern to exploit. If you can cancel out the buffs quickly, she'll never get too strong, meaning you should have no trouble. Her weakness is fire, so hit her with as much of that as you can manage, and it'll be over fast. When the dust settles, this maid Sakuya comes outside and decides to put us in jail for a week for attacking her gatekeeper. What kind of freaky shit are you doing in this mansion that you have your own jail? With no choice in the matter, we prepare ourselves for an eternity of hard time when we're greeted by our cellmate, Marisa. I guess security here is pretty tight if even she couldn't get through. Or maybe not. Marisa explains that she's been thrown in jail here so many times that the cells don't actually have bars on them anymore because she's destroyed them over the years. So, we can just walk out. Seems awesome at first until you realize, number one, this jail is fucking gigantic, and number two, you have to sneak past Sakuya to get upstairs. She's represented by this huge orb that patrols the map. These become a gimmick through the rest of the game. Basically, you need to try and plan a route through the dungeon that avoids the orbs. If you're caught by one of these things, you might have to fight a difficult enemy, or you might even get sent back to the start of the level. If you've played Etrian Odyssey or Persona Q, these are pretty much FOEs. My best advice is just be mindful. Walk in circles for a little bit in a safe spot, have your map up, and just watch what they do. The orbs only move when you do, so take your time. When you finally get out of there, Marisa tells us to head to the library up on the second floor. This dungeon reminds me a lot of Devil Summoner, you know, like the City Hall stage. I really like when these games have levels that are just houses or public buildings or something. They have a good atmosphere and usually end up being favorites. This is a big-ass mansion, and there's a lot of ground to cover. You should consider recruiting Remelia Scarlet when you run into her, as well as her sister Flanders Scarlet. I found Remelia in particular to be especially useful because she's got a move called Leg Stab that lowers an enemy's evasion while attacking them at the same time. She also has Vampire Stance, which makes you harder to hit and allows all attacks to heal you at the cost of doing a bit less damage. If that wasn't enough, Remelia has a special move too, Blood-Sucking Universe, an attack that can paralyze an enemy and also heals you. Really, just a badass character all around. You also need her for an optional fight against Flander, who wants to battle Remelia's sleeper. I found her to be really easy. Your reward is an enchanted doll, which lets you die once with no penalty, as well as a permanent +3 increase to your luck. As I understand it, this is one of the most iconic Touhou characters, and in the game Embodiment of Scarlet Devil, she can do crazy shit like this, so perhaps I should be a little more thankful it wasn't too hard. Around the time I got close to the library, I was organizing my party and made an executive decision that for the rest of the game, I would use Kisume on every boss fight I could manage. I came pretty close to swapping her out for Sakuya's sleeper, but nah, fuck it. Bucket Bastard's legacy can't stop here. The situation inside is looking pretty dire. The real Remelia is in here, as well as the librarian, Patchouli. Now get a load of this one. Patchouli's full name is Patchouli Knowledge. Is that what that head's full of? I guess she looks pretty smart. Marisa freaks out and runs away, which distracts Remelia, leaving us alone with Miss Knowledge. Not gonna lie, this is a pretty dangerous boss. It's almost like a buffing contest. You need to power yourself up fast and beat the shit out of her underlings before they buff themselves. Time is absolutely of the essence. Waste too much and you might lose control. Anything that hits multiple targets is a godsend. Patchouli herself is weak to physical, so you should have no issues consistently taking advantage of that. As long as you can knock out the two helpers, you can get through this, but it definitely takes a little bit of effort to pull off. When she gives in, Remelia offers to have a chat with us in her room back on the first floor, and Marisa says we can meet up later and look over the books she managed to steal. I don't know why I was expecting anything else, but like the rest of the world, Remelia also wants to act like a wise motherfucker with us, and asks if we'd go pick up her dinner before we talk. Kinda like getting water for En-no Ozuno in SMT1. So you walk to the kitchen, and the chef wants you to decide on the final ingredient. I chose broccoli because, come on, steak and broccoli? That's classic. Go find a potato, and we're good. But what happens is, they actually make the steak out of broccoli, which kinda blew my mind. Now come on, let's do a little imagination exercise. Do you think Remelia Scarlet likes broccoli? No, she doesn't, so she decides to kill us. I knew I should have put garlic in this shit. Alrighty, boss time again. Not as bad as Patchouli. Ironically, using Remelia against herself is one of the better strategies I found. That leg stab move really comes in handy for keeping the damage at bay. If you debuff an enemy's agility 3 times, they have a lot of trouble hitting you, and it's pretty easy to keep it that way as long as you can spam that move. You'll have to deal with Vampire Stance being used against you in this battle, which means you'll be missing shots more than usual too, and have to deal with the passive healing that it brings. All in all, not overly difficult, but it can shape up to be a somewhat long battle when you're both struggling to hit each other. As Remelia sits defeated, we take a selfie in her room. She says she only lost because she was hungry, and then sucks some of Sakuya's blood. Pretty crazy relationship they have, but hey, I won't judge. At long last, we can get some real information out of her. Remelia says the mansion was built hundreds of years ago and has gone largely unnoticed since then because of the mist surrounding the place. So, the mansion has nothing to do with the monolith. That's it? We just did all of that to get back to square one? Oh, what the fuck? At the very least, I guess we know vampires have nothing to do with our problem. And hey, it was pretty fun. And we got a nice new photo for the collection. Being a hero's some tough shit. As soon as we get back outside, we have another text alerting us to a new floor at the monolith. When we trudge our ass back up there, we're met by Reimu again, who now flat out doesn't trust us because we appeared so fast after the stairs showed up. We assure her that it's all a big funny coincidence, but it's not enough to convince her, and she decides to settle it with a duel. Yeah, seriously, you have to fight Reimu. By all means, this should be the hardest fight in like any video game, considering what she's capable of, but it's not that bad. I think she's probably holding back. Much like the Parsi fight back on the bridge in the underworld, I was taken off guard by this one and wasn't really ready for it, but I still managed to pull it off by the skin of my teeth. The leg stab trick doesn't work here because she blocks pierce attacks. I also noticed she blocks the force element, but I was getting by okay by just hitting her with standard attacks and the occasional ice magic. I had just retooled Kisume to be a support unit, so she was doing well at countering most of the buffs and debuffs thrown our way. I think the most annoying attack you'll have to deal with is Needle Throw, a pierce attack that hits your entire team. It doesn't do crazy damage, but a few of those will wear you down fast. When Reimu decides to spare you, she admits that it wouldn't make much sense for us to be the culprit because we aren't capable of summoning huge-ass monoliths from nothing. That's a good reason. As she leaves, she turns the incident over to us and says she's done with it. Holy shit, she must be so bored. Well, you know what that means. I got my big boy pants on, this is my show now, and nobody can try and boss me around about it. From here, I decided to explore some of the second floor. There's actually not much of a point in doing this yet, unless you're just curious, because we can't reach the third floor yet. The gimmick here involves activating switches that open up a secret door somewhere in the room you're in. You just have to find the door and head through, but in some instances, there'll be a giant orb that chases you around while you try and do it. Get caught, and you have to reactivate the switch and try again. Back at the human village, we pay another visit to Aku, who says if we want to go see Marisa, she lives over in the Forest of Magic to the west of here. The place is apparently filled with toxic spores, and Aku suggests visiting the medicine lady to get something that can help us with that. The medicine lady stands in a hidden tile behind this house here, and looks like a cross between a samurai and a crack dealer. She offers to get us something to help with the poison, but we have to meet her at a place called the Bamboo Forest of the Lost. I think that would be code word for I will sell you drugs behind Denny's later. Alright, well, against all of my better judgment, let's go over to the Bamboo Forest. You really can't miss it. Head southwest out of town and it's this big ass green area down here. Stroll on in and our dealer ditches her costume, revealing herself to be a bunny girl named Rei Sen. She guides us through the forest and then plops us on our ass in a huge building called Ente, or the House of Eternity. If we want to deal with the poison, we have to track down the owner, a girl named Kaguya, and no, Rei-sen's not gonna help us do that. You know, I kinda thought as the medicine woman she'd like give us the fucking thing we need, but whatever. Ente, what can I say? This place's defining characteristic is long corridors and lots of them. This dungeon lives up to the name because sometimes these hallways really do feel like they last forever. You have to make it through 2 floors of this, though there is a checkpoint containing a healing room, an anomaly, and a terminal on the first floor. If you can manage to recruit Rei-sen's sleeper, you get a great spell called Himeri that heals the entire group instead of a single target. There are probably ways to acquire it sooner than this, but having another team member with access to it is extremely valuable. After a whole lot of walking around, you might come across this nurse named Erin, who says there's a gas mask being kept in the mansion that will allow us to breathe safely in the Forest of Magic, but it's broken. Apparently, Rei-sen herself gave it to this Princess Kaguya who owns the place. When you finally track down Kaguya's room, you'll see she has quite the collection of strange shit on display. When we ask her to borrow the gas mask, she refers to it as broken junk, but still won't let us have it. There's an option to bribe her with a shitload of money, but that seems like a waste to me. Let's just steal it. So we swipe the thing and run out, but now the stage has changed and Kaguya's guards are looking for us. It's time for more orbs. You shouldn't have a ton of trouble with this since we're retracing our own steps. Find your way back to Erin, and she offers to fix the mask for us. At least until our old bunny pal comes in and snitches on us, and they both decide to give us a punishment. Whose side is she even on? Okay, so Erin's weak to ice, so I had Kisame blast away with that, while I focused on nailing both of them with leg stabs. I opted to try and bring down Erin first, even though they're honestly equally as threatening, capable of hitting your entire team with a variety of elements like mind and electricity. A group healing spell is practically required here, unless you're just some kind of absolute gaming god. As is the case with most of these double boss fights, after one goes down, you can make pretty short work of the other. When it's all over, we snap a selfie and run out with the gas mask, as Erin says the guards will basically chase us to the ends of the earth. There are substantially more orbs to deal with now, and I actually did get my ass caught a couple of times. In this stage, that means fighting a battle you can't flee from. It's not a death sentence to end up in this situation, but it is a big drain on your resources. After fighting your balls off to escape the world's most low-stakes heist, we find ourselves deep in the bamboo forest, where we get a text message about a new floor at the Dreamer's Monolith. That would be nice to check out, but without our bunny friend, we're gonna have to find our own way through this place. It's kind of a weird mini-stage, not actually that big, but most of it consists of dark sections with treasure scattered throughout. Deep in the forest, you can find this girl, Moko, who has the ability to control fire. She asks if we'd like to play a prank on Princess Kaguya and hands us a piece of coal, saying we can use it to write swear words on the walls at Ayente. This is such a ballsy idea. Like, the place is probably still on high alert, and we're gonna go back in just to fuck around with them. Yeah, let's do it. In a few spots throughout Ayente, usually at the end of really long corridors, there'll be tiles where you now have the option to write on the walls. After enough of this, Kaguya appears and asks what Kaguya sucks means. Moko shoots her in the face with a fireball, and then we have to fight her. Listen, I don't know what this character did to deserve all of this, but we are really just shitting on her life today. She's weak against pierce attacks, and coincidentally, my team at the moment had a lot of those, so the fight was really fast. Spam the hell out of her, and she has no chance. Kaguya leaves afterwards, not really as upset as I thought she would be, and Moko brings us back to the bamboo forest, gifting us a flamethrower for our help. This is a good weapon. I mean, do I have to say that? It's a flamethrower. You should definitely take the time to do this quest. Alright, fun's over. Let's see what's cooking back at the Monolith. Honestly, there's not really much to say about Floor 3. It's basically more of Floor 2's gimmicks. Flip the switch, find the door, avoid the orbs, rinse and repeat. You can rack up some XP here and find a handful of goodies, but there are no plot happenings going on, so it's kinda up to you. You can either do it now or save it for later. If we take our shitty gas mask to the Forest of Magic right above the bamboo forest, we find that it does work if equipped, for Sumireko. Your allies are still going to get poisoned, so you'll either want to walk around without them or have a lot of antidotes ready to go. They're pretty cheap at the store, so stock up and get ready to burn through them. Despite the dangers of this place, it was actually one of my favorite dungeons visually. The forest looks really comfy. I like the way the trees look and the little mushrooms along the floor. If the poison gas weren't here, I'd probably find myself living here too. There's a little fairy you can find that talks about an even worse poisonous forest to the west called Muinzuka, so really, this one's just like a warm-up. Before I found Marisa's house, I found someone else's place, this freaky girl named Alice. I've heard her design is actually based on Alice from Shin Megami Tensei, and as far as I can tell from researching it, that seems to be true. Pretty cool. If you know anything about SMT Alice, you'll know this isn't someone you want to run up on by yourself. Usually she's pretty tough, and this game is no exception. Alice wants to test our puppeteering skills, referring to our control over the sleepers, and challenges us to a battle. She's actually nice enough to give you unlimited prep time, so if you're going around the place with no allies summoned, step out and get your team ready first. This is a tough encounter, another one focusing on how well you can manage buffs. Alice loves to buff herself, and she has this nasty move called Master of Puppets where she can take control of one of your party members. Let's say this happens to be your support character. Well, that's a problem. The key to success here is to be able to function with only 3 people. You need to have a nice even spread of support spells across your entire team, or just get lucky. Alice is weak to fire, which meant I was just spraying with my flamethrower every round, trying to build up SP. Funnily enough, just as it looked like the team was about to run out of magic, Kisame actually dealt the killing blow with a pretty weak ice attack, saving the day and helping me beat the fight on my first attempt. Very nice. When the duel's over, Alice concludes that we're pretty unskilled overall, but gives us a new yokai grimoire that makes it so that sleepers don't consume battery whatsoever, but they also don't gain XP anymore. This is an interesting trade-off, and perhaps really powerful if you find yourself constantly hijacking and changing up your team anyway. I never messed around with this one, but it might be something I try on a future playthrough. Alright, so the whole reason we came here, Marisa's house. She's glad to see us and says she just finished up learning some spells from the book she stole. Unfortunately, the famous magician must be a little rusty because she messes up the first spell and summons a group of yokai to fight by accident. Bring these down and guess what? She does it again. After you finish the second fight, Marisa says she's learned enough about these spells to conclude the monolith wasn't created with magic. Great, scratch that off the list too. No vampires, no magic. Our only real lead is that taking selfies is tied to all this shit, and we come to the conclusion that we simply need to make more memories, take more pictures, and see what happens. From here, we can report back to Akyu, but let's poke around the forest a bit more first. We do have some unfinished business. Attached to the Forest of Magic is a separate, smaller sub-dungeon called the Spring Path. I actually didn't find out what this was for until way after I beat the game. There's a side quest connected to it where you can earn the Explorer Grimoire, which makes it easier to fill out your map at the cost of earning slightly less SP. The quest is connected to some kind of encounter in the Forest of Magic, so I must have passed it over by mistake. The Spring Path is free of poison, but of course, if you want more poison, there's Muinzuka, found by leaving the Forest of Magic through a western exit. There's a whole section of the Overworld back here, and even a town called Mayohiga. The only thing waiting for you here is a cat girl named Chen, who asks if we'd go into Muinzuka and feed antidotes to all of her buddies roaming around in there. So how bad is this place? You really want to know? Well, I'll tell you. Come here. Nah, it's okay. It's bad. This place is fucking scary. These are the woods behind Grandpa's house that you can't go in past 6 p.m. I don't know why stray cats would hang out in here. It just emanates evil, and nearly the entire landscape is poisoned. You gotta find like 6 cats in here and have an antidote for each one. This place is a pain in the ass, and you won't want to spend any more time in here than you absolutely have to. On rare occasions throughout the game, you'll find actual map items that give you a full map of whatever dungeon you're in. I'd say this is one such place, where if you have one of these, just use it. Check this out, you see each of the exclamation points on the map? Each one's a cat. You run straight to each one, in and out, quick and easy, you're done. Without this item, you're going to be stumbling around here for a while trying to track them all down. If you can manage to find them all, Chen will gift you free cat ears, which boost your agility by quite a bit. Regardless if you care about the cat ears or not, you should do this quest because it's like your one chance to do a truly good deed in Gensokyo. Back at Akyu's place, we tell her we need to make more memories, and she offers a handful of ideas. We should visit Yokai Mountain, the animal realm located in the depths of hell, and the lunar capital. You know, on the moon. That is one crazy vacation list, and from here, the game opens up significantly, allowing you to choose what order you do things in. Before doing anything, I decided to swing back by Hakure's shrine, just to see if Reimu had any tips. We tell her that we want to visit the moon, and she calls it a nasty place, but helps us out anyway. Our only real option for getting there is to go through the dream world, which should be pretty simple for Sumireko, who gets here by dreaming in the first place. To be honest, I had a feeling it wasn't going to be that simple, so I decided to push it to the back of the list. I think Yokai Mountain might make a better first stop. To reach Yokai Mountain, you have to cross Misty Lake, and how do you do that? Well, guess what? You need a life preserver, and where do you think that is? Oh, come on, seriously, yell out the answer like it's fucking Nick Jr. up in here. It's in Muinzuka! What do you think, you buy it at the store or something? No, you gotta venture all the way to the opposite end of the dungeon from where you start, and this mouse thing gives it to you. You have the option of fighting her for some reason, but if you're not into that, just take the thing and run. Once you got the floaty, now you can zip right across the lake, and now, there are even more branching paths in front of us. Which way leads to Yokai Mountain? Well, only one way to find out. As long as it's not back in that forest. A short walk to the west has you come across an abandoned western mansion. What's up with all these games and western mansions? There's never anything good going on inside. Every enemy in here pulled my nuts up over my head. The battle music changes to this intense new music. And you're going up against people who are out for blood. Even with Marisa's sleeper on my side, it was really difficult. I was probably a bit underleveled for the place. The good news is, being underleveled in this game doesn't mean you can't win, you just have to be more strategic and really focus on hitting weaknesses. You'll find a special item called the Prims River Trumpet in some obscure corner of the mansion. But when you pick it up, it floats away from you and you're confronted by Lunasa Prims River, who wants it back. This is one of those dungeons where the stage itself is harder than the boss. Lunasa's not much of a challenge. If you were able to get this far, you have nothing to worry about. Falling back on your usual strategies is more than enough to get you through. After the fight, Lunasa hands over the trumpet. It's a pretty bizarre gun item. You can equip it and it has a really pathetic damage stat, but when you use it, it boosts your entire team's attack, so it has some utility. On the way out of this place, I used the anomaly, hoping to save my game, but instead of allowing me to do that, it teleported me into the depths of space, where this elf girl named Dorami Sweet introduces herself as the ruler of dreams. Apparently our dream self is becoming unstable, which caused us to pop in over here instead of back in the real world. This doesn't sound too healthy, but Dorami sends us back to Gensokyo and unlocks the ability to instantly teleport between discovered anomalies. This is a huge time saver for obvious reasons. All in all, the mansion is a neat stage, but there's no secret entrance to the mountains or anything, so I guess we have to keep looking. If you keep going west past the mansion, you actually find an ominous cave guarded by Kutaka, the gatekeeper of hell. This is the entrance to the real hell, as opposed to the old former hell we visited earlier. Kutaka wiped the floor with me a couple of times, and I took that as a hint to maybe go play somewhere else for a while. Swim to the middle of Misty Lake, and you'll find a river going east that splits off into a cave system. The first cave I explored was called the Canal of Willows Cave. The enemies in here are nothing to laugh at, and you'll want to get to work right away with your hijacks to keep your team bolstered. A really good sleeper you can find is Wakasagi Hime, a mermaid that has excellent stats, a lot of MP, and a more powerful group healing spell. She's very useful as the difficulty continues to ramp up. After leaving this cave, we find ourselves on a higher up piece of land. Next, we have to clear the Nameless Hill. Pretty brief stage, but there is a boss fight against a yokai named Medicine Melancholy. She likes to try and hit you with status ailments like poison and confusion. She can also slam you with a couple of elemental attack spells. With Wakasagi Hime's help, Medicine had a very difficult time lowering our health that much. Aside from the occasional scary moment when a status effect would mess something up, she's not too bad. Beating her gives you the Loner Grimoire, which makes it so that you can't summon sleepers, but you take less damage and spend less MP on spells. Now, I thought coming all the way up here would lead us to Yokai Mountain, but it's kind of a fake out. The nameless hill doesn't lead anywhere further, and we have to head back to the river. Don't worry though, we are getting closer. Next, I made my way inside the Genbu Ravine. This isn't the right path either, but it's extremely important that you find it. Inside the Genbu Ravine, you've got healing, a place to save, a terminal, and we meet up with Nitori again, who offers to give us rewards based on how many sleepers we collect. So, you know how in SMT games people try and fill up the entire compendium with every demon in the game? It's the same deal here. As you register more and more sleepers to the database, Nitori will reward you with decreased retrieval fees. Without spoiling too much yet, this is integral to gaining access to this game's secret ending and post-game content, so if you've been slacking on registering sleepers to the database, be sure you get on that, and remember where Genbu Ravine is. Okay, well, by process of elimination, there's only one cave left, and it's actually just above the branching river. Man, I really chose every optional path in a row, except the right one. Well, at long last, we're finally starting our hike to Yokai Mountain. This is the lower Yokai Mountain cave system. You got some interesting opponents in here, like Momiji, a wolf yokai who likes to stand in front of her allies and take hits for them. Usually, the one she's protecting has some kind of nasty move that can fuck you up, so be prepared for that. Having Momiji on your side is pretty useful for the same reason. You can have her protect anyone on your team that's a little squishy during a boss fight or something. Another one worth picking up is Mike, who has good physical abilities as well as a spell called Mimic that lets her copy any spell that's cast by another party member. This can be a great thing to pass along to Sumireko, or anyone really. Let's say one of your party members has a solid buff spell. Anyone on your team with Mimic can cast it at the same time they do. You can do some pretty crazy shit with this if you're creative, like a ton of damage at once, a full team heal in one round, you name it. When you climb out of Lower Yokai Mountain, you end up in the snow, where there's a casino. Didn't really expect this to make an appearance. I used to play a lot of the casino in Shin Megami Tensei If, and especially in Kyoyaku Megami Tensei. I don't think it's really as important here as it was in those titles, but the games you can play are actually really fun. Your first game is odds and evens. You just place a bet and decide if a dice is going to roll odd or even. It's a quick way to make some money. Then you got cups, where you follow around a cup that has a ball under it. A little bit tricky. But the best game of all is Pachinko. Pachinko is very addicting. You get to control how hard you shoot the ball. It feels really satisfying. It's got a good weight to it. I made some money off of this one. If you're shooting for every achievement in the game, you actually have to win a game of cups. So, I hope you like looking at balls. Aside from the casino, we've also got a path to the Great Yokai Forest. In here, we're confronted by a reporter named Aya, who asks us a handful of questions that really annoy Sumireko. She wants to know how it feels to be the protagonist and shit like that. But her questions start to take an accusatory tone as if we're the ones behind the incident. The interview soon devolves into a brawl, and we gotta bring her down. Aya's got a special move called News of the World that debuffs your attack, defense, and evasion all at once. She also likes to hit your party with critical slash, but she's weak to pierce. I've noticed a lot of these bosses with pierce weaknesses tend to be pretty easy, probably because it's such a common damage type. Pile on the attacks, watch your health, and it's over in the blink of an eye. Before Aya leaves, you can even say skill issue, which adds insult to injury. The Yokai Forest is pretty peaceful otherwise. There are Tengu up here who warn you about the dangers nearby, but I think they're being kinda dramatic. By this point you've gained some levels and the challenge eases up a bit. From here, you just have the upper cave system to get through. We're almost to the top. It's been one hell of a climb. When we finally make it, we're at Moria Shrine, a really quaint place tucked away up here by itself. The shrine has two guardians, Sanai and Kaneko, who talk about how long it's been since the humans managed to get up here. Ordinarily, there's a rope system that can be used to easily reach the top of the mountain, but they've had to close it down because of all the trouble with the sleepers. Kaneko asks if we'd help them investigate the source of some earthquakes that have recently been plaguing the area, saying that the issue seems to be coming from within Rainbow Dragon Cave. This cave is actually near the casino off to the east. Sanai comes with us and casts a spell to ventilate the cave's toxic fumes, but says that we need to hurry because it's still dangerous here. Before venturing too far down here, you should nab a Kaneko sleeper for yourself. She comes with a lot of HP and a lot of MP, and makes an excellent frontliner to tank some damage. Every step you take in these blue colored tiles hurts you, and you still have to fight battles all along the way, so having some beefy characters helps out. The music in here is great. Definitely one of the game's more atmospheric locations if you ask me. As you reach the boss, the earthquakes intensify, and the cause is revealed to be the powerful yokai, Momoyo. Momoyo explains that the sleepers have been bothering her, but not attacking her, just standing in the way. Considering how violent they are towards us, that's pretty strange. Do you really think it's just that they don't like us? Anyway, Momoyo agrees to stop pounding the walls and causing earthquakes, provided we can beat her in a fight. Let's show her how it's done. Honestly, Momoyo's kind of a beast. She has a move that allows her to reflect all physical damage for a turn, so having access to magic attacks here is vital, or you're just going to be beating yourself up the entire time. Kisame fought hard during this battle, but ultimately kicked the bucket, and I had to finish things up with Momiji, Wakasagi Hime, and Kaneko. When we return to the shrine, instead of being met with praise and thanks, we're told that the girl who interviewed us back at the forest stopped by and gave them a newspaper that depicts us as the culprit behind the Monolith Incident. Journalism at its finest. Despite our pleas of innocence, Kaneko and Sanai don't believe us, and in true Touhou fashion decide to beat the hell out of us. Well, you know how Momoyo could reflect physical attacks, right? Well, Kaneko can do it too, but now you've got Sanai to deal with on top of it. It's basically the fight we just did but on crack. This was a really close battle for me. It went on for a long time as we both traded blows back and forth. They're truly intimidating opponents. Sanai can even copy Kaneko's abilities, meaning they share a big pool of dangerous moves. I'd say you should go for Sanai first. She's weak to electricity. Once she's down, don't get too comfy. Kaneko is perfectly capable of wiping the floor with you by herself, and hits hard with group targeting attacks. When you pull through, you take your selfie, get an apology, and the rope shortcut back down the mountain is back open. All in a day's work. You know, this place was a pain in the ass to reach, but I really like how that plays into this game's theme of making memories. You're damn well gonna remember how hard some of these bosses are. In dungeon crawlers, a structured story usually isn't that prevalent. Most of the story ends up being generated by you as you explore and face different challenges, or barely make it out of some crazy situation alive. It's neat to see this game embrace that the dungeons themselves are the story, and it's all about the journey rather than just beating the game. Alright, 2 destinations to go. Hell and the Moon. We do unlock another floor of the Monolith after finishing Yokai Mountain, but this time I opted to just save it for the final approach. Let's keep the ball rolling and swing by Hell for a bit. If you've forgotten where it was after all that excitement, it's off to the west, past the creepy abandoned mansion. Round 2 against Kutaka went a lot better than before. She has an interesting ability that makes it so every time you attack her, it debuffs your defense. If you do this 2 or 3 times in a row and don't clear it, you're gonna be in trouble, so you have to play this one pretty slow, taking time to diligently remove the debuff, then attack, and repeat until she's defeated. After winning, Kutaka allows us passage, saying that we should be okay down in Hell. Now this is the rotting sea of flames. The fire burns hotter, the enemies hit harder. You're in for a good time. To hammer home that this is the real Hell, the healers are ghosts now. Cute. You're gonna get tossed around down here, plain and simple. I know Kutaka just said we'd be fine, but I think she meant that in the loosest way possible. Encounters are frequent, and the groups are often large. You'll find that enemies like to heal themselves, incentivizing fast takedowns instead of drawn-out slugfests. The spells being tossed at you are way juiced up compared to earlier stages, meaning there is no room to be lazy with protecting your weaknesses. I recruited a sleeper down here just to get an idea of the level difference, and it was clear I was a little bit in over my head, with the first one I grabbed being level 46 and my strongest ally being 36. Not to worry though, we made it this far, we will fight it out to the end. Do as many hijacks as you can manage, paying special mind to the battery draining tiles down here. When you get to the end of this floor, battered and bruised, you're met by Mayumi, a soldier who's involved with some kind of faction war down here in Hell. There are 3 groups further down in the animal realm that are fighting for control: the Kiketsu family, the Keiga family, and the Gokyo Alliance. According to Mayumi, each of these groups terrorizes human spirits, and she needs the help of someone who can control sleepers to fight on behalf of humanity and beat each of them back. After agreeing to offer our assistance, Mayumi leads us further into the entrance of the animal realm. It's a skyscraper, and outside the windows, the place looks like a modern-day city, enveloped in fog and a crimson-red sky. It's honestly a really neat and disturbing locale. I don't know if it's the intention, but I wonder if Animal Hell looks like a city because it's like the exact opposite of nature. If I was like a deer or something, I wouldn't want to go here when I died. The experience of playing this dungeon is like being lost in the streets at night with a dead cell phone. Maybe somewhere in Miami. You constantly feel on edge. Encounters can be brutal, and there are roaming orbs that force you into lengthy battles if they catch you. Even with a solid team, the sheer volume of combat you'll be doing is going to wear you down. You have to make it through 4 floors of this skyscraper before we get to the bottom, where we're met with a bridge leading over towards another structure suspended over a lake. The leader of the Gokyo Alliance, Yuma, stops us on our approach, informing us that the place up ahead is called the Primate Spirit Garden, and very soon it will be destroyed and remade under their control. Knowing that things are about to get ugly, Mayumi heals our team and it's time for a battle. Like Ramelia back in the Scarlet Devil Mansion, Yuma can use Vampire Stance, which allows her to heal by dealing damage. She puts up moderate resistance with hard-hitting physical attacks, but many of my team members resisted them, so she never really ended up putting too much of a dent in us. My biggest regret was that I didn't use Kisame here. Even though we got some healing beforehand, this fight blindsided me, and I didn't have her summoned. I was too afraid that if I did summon her in the middle of things, I'd fuck up and have to replay that entire dungeon. For those of you watching who are really invested in her journey, don't worry. She does get a redemption arc pretty soon. After Yuma surrenders, she admits that if we destroy the other factions, it's still a win for her and walks off, leaving the doors to the Primate Spirit Garden wide open. This is an awesome stage. I was kinda expecting some kinda garden with plants or something, but this is more like a garden of the soul. Truly an ethereal place, and pretty fucking big too. You have to take a very long walk to reach the boss. It's quite the adventure, and there are even some nasty one-way doors that will send you back to earlier areas if you're not careful. Let me show you something. You see my map on this footage? Look at all the orbs running around down here. You have a lot of shit to avoid. There are rooms with like 5 or 6 at one time, and you gotta matrix your way through it. This is another stage I'd really suggest having a burner phone for. It's a fun and challenging first time experience, but I have to imagine grinding back through it a second time is pretty tough. Well, actually, I don't have to imagine that because it happened to me. Here's the deal. If you can get to the end in one piece, you get an alignment choice. It doesn't affect the ending or anything like that, but it determines what boss you're about to go up against. When we step into the arena, we meet Keiki, Mayumi's commanding officer. Opposing us are Saki and Yachiie, leaders of the Keiga and Kiketsu families respectively. Keiki and Mayumi just want you to blow these fuckers away and save the human spirits, but Yachiie takes a minute to try and get you on her side. She asks if human spirits are above the rules of nature. Down here in the animal realm, it's a dog-eat-dog world, where people are meant to compete fiercely. H.E.L.P believes the current state of humanity is in shambles because they rely on God for protection, using this very dungeon as an example. Keiki tells us this place is a fortress specifically built to protect the human spirits, but H.E.L.P sees it as more of a prison, holding them back. If we take the side of the animal realm families, we can tear this place down and make all of the human spirits truly free. It's an interesting argument, but I stayed allied with the human protectors for a couple of reasons. Number one, my character is a human with magical abilities and shit, and even I'm getting my ass beat down here. Some normal human soul stands no chance of getting their footing. And number two, Mayumi healed me before that last boss fight, and I'll take any fraction of kindness I can get. So, the die is cast, our choice is made. We're gonna teach these warring factions a lesson. On my first attempt, the two killed me almost instantly. Alright, not great, but after recruiting Saki's sleeper, who has powerful pierce attacks, as well as Keiki, who's a great healer, I had a bit more luck. Saki, despite using pierce attacks against you, is also weak to them herself, and she's really easy to bring down once you figure that out. H.E.L.P tries to hit you with various status ailments and mind attacks. As long as she doesn't hit your healer with something nasty like paralysis, you'll be okay, but that can easily ruin an attempt if you're unlucky. I used Kisume here very briefly, but she couldn't get much done. It was clear if I wanted to kill the final boss with her like God intended, I'd have some serious improvements to make. As our opponents fall, they accept the law of the land, where might makes right, and leave the area. We take our selfie, Keiki bestows us with a powerful piece of armor, and all that's left on our list is to find our way to the moon. Take a quick break, restock and resupply, and then get sleepy because we gotta go through the dream world. You can access it from any anomaly. Visually, it's kinda confusing because you can see through all of the walls. Rather than look at the actual screen, I mostly just navigated using the minimap. In comparison to where we just were, this place is a cakewalk. I think the most optimal sequence of events was probably Mountain, Moon, Hell, but we shook things up a little bit, and that's okay. I'm not gonna complain about having an easier time with the battles, and something about the moon just feels so grand and final, like it needs to be our final stop. If you're leveled up enough and you don't want to fight enemies at all, you might want to make use of sleeper alarms. These are incredibly cheap items that once used stop all random encounters as long as you have SP. It drains a small portion with every step, but as long as you're good at hitting weaknesses, you can easily do a couple fights, raise it back up, and then go back to no battles. I'm pretty sure the effect goes away once you pass through stairs, so you'll have to use another one, but they're so inexpensive that it barely matters. When we're done in the dream world, we step into a room that looks like any other, but it teleports us into a lab-like facility on the moon called the Sea of Tranquility. The place is crawling with rabbits, like Ray Sen from earlier. They see us as an intruder and radio back to the lunar capital about what's going on. Look, I might have been able to handle a gas mask heist in the middle of the woods, but if I'm gonna become the moon's most wanted criminal, I'm not as confident about making it out alive. There are a lot of encounters to blast through, but no difficult puzzles or traps to look out for. To move on to the next zone, you just have to find a switch that activates a teleporter, and then step onto it. The next place you end up is the Sea of Serenity, which looks and plays much the same. Make short work of this one, and this time we get warped into a supply closet in a house at the lunar capital. Another rabbit pops out and asks if we do a favor for their entire species. Apparently, these guys get exploited for labor by the people who live on the moon, and in response, they've formed the Moon Rabbit Liberation Front. If we storm the palace for them, they might be able to secure some cool shit, like, workers' rights. So it's not gonna be a heist this time, we've upgraded to armed insurrection. Classic shit. Cautiously stepping out of the house, we can walk around the lunar capital for a bit. There's another rabbit girl you can meet who thinks the Liberation Front is a terrible idea, but guess what? I'm already fully committed to the revolution, so don't bother trying to talk me down now. Walk up to the gates of the Moon Palace and get that ass ready because guess what it is? Oh, you know. 2 floors of teleporters, baby. I am fired up now. This is one monster of a dungeon. Each of these teleporters can warp you to a different spot based on what direction you enter it from. That means you don't just gotta think about what teleporter to take, you have to think about the direction you walk into it for each one as well. I'm not a math guy, but I'd say that greatly increases the potential amount of solutions to this puzzle. Aside from a dungeon that comes way later, I think this is the stage I spent the most time on. It's a good old-fashioned Shin Megami Tensei tier balls to the wall crawl, and I can't say I didn't like it. I mean, it got the blood flowing in all the right places. You'll just have to keep a close eye on your map, and maybe jot down a few notes as you go through it. Even if you suck total ass at this like I do, by process of elimination, eventually you will get it done, so just keep it up. As you explore this place, you're able to find a moon rabbit uniform and a rifle. These can be equipped for the time being, but if you bring them all the way back to the medicine lady in the human village, you'll get a nice reward. Keep it in mind. When you reach the boss room, you step into some kind of Kill Bill fight scene, as you're attacked by Yorihime and Toyohime, who are each Lunarian princesses. They tell us that the sleepers arrived on the moon along with us, and see us as a threat for obvious reasons. I mean, we are here to secure workers' rights after all. Right off the bat, Kisume was destroyed by an electric attack, and I kinda thought I was in for a real beating, but to be honest, it's a fast fight. I'm talking 3 minutes, and they both went down. Yorihime is weak to pierce, so once I had her isolated, the fight was basically over as Saki and Sumireko went to town with their best moves. When they fall, we snap our final selfie, and the princesses agree to give the rabbits 1 week of paid vacation if they lose 2 or more limbs while working. Sounds fair to me. With that, I warped my ass right off the moon and back to the human village. You know, I have to say, Reimu was kinda right. That was a weird place. My first order of business after returning was to spend some time strengthening the party for whatever was next. Kisume needed to acquire some serious gains, so I sacrificed the entire Touhou cast to her in order to get her up to speed. I also started to respec Sumireko around here. Up until now, I'd mostly been using her as a strong physical attacker with the occasional spell or support thrown in. Now I was thinking I'd retool her to be a magic user with heavier emphasis on support. After I was done with my upgrades, I revisited the Monolith and cleared all of the floors we unlocked from doing the mountain, hell, and the moon. When we get to floor 6, we're met by Yukari, an extremely powerful yokai who seems to be teasing us a little bit. She comments on how this entire incident has basically amounted to a series of vacations for us to enjoy on summer break, and asks us if we know who would want to cause something like that. Yukari assures us that she wants to solve the incident just as much as we do, and says we're the key piece in figuring it out. Yukari says that our dream form is not powerful enough as it is to get this done, and decides to unlock our true abilities, granting us the power to fly. Damn. From here, we should be able to access a handful of new locations, which Yukari suggests we visit and take photographs at so that we can proceed to the top of the monolith. I had a feeling things weren't quite done yet, so looks like our world tour is going to have a bit of an encore. This is basically the beginning of the end. We're rapidly approaching the endgame, and these last few dungeons, while cool, go by pretty fast. If you thought having a little floaty to swim around with made the world feel more open, well, you're gonna shit yourself when you walk outside and can fly. As I usually do when I get to this part of an RPG, I kinda just flew around at random looking for anything new I could find. What soon caught my eye was the Garden of the Sun, a massive field of sunflowers tucked away in the middle of a vast forest, previously out of our reach. Here's another stage I love aesthetically. I'd love to actually just walk around in here myself, it seems like a cool place. The Garden of the Sun is full of weird sleepers, many of which are bug-themed, like this one, named Wriggle. The only real cause for concern in this dungeon are some areas that drain your battery, otherwise it's just a stroll through the garden. Now don't get me wrong, it's a big-ass garden, and there are a lot of fights, but compared to the animal realm or something, pretty chill. The boss here is Yuka, caretaker of the flowers. We stroll on into her room like we're the new kid at juvenile hall, and ask if she's the strongest one around here. Then, the fight starts. She might not look so tough, but it was a shockingly lengthy battle. Yuka has a move called Bloody Roots that deals moderate damage to a unit and completely tanks their evasion to the lowest it will go. She can also hit you with fire and electricity, and can focus her attacks, which makes them more powerful during the next round. With Kisume managing buffs and debuffs and a lucky hit with Vision Stab which blinded Yuka for a few turns, I was able to tilt the odds in my favor and gain the upper hand, carrying the momentum through to the end. You'll likely find yourself healing every round in this fight. She can just put out a lot of different kinds of damage and always keeps you on full alert. When she's done, we take our selfie, receive a polite death threat, and take our leave. See, I told you, pretty quick. So after this stage, you'll want to float on over to this spot, a little bit to the west of the casino on Yokai Mountain. You can see a structure in the trees, and if you land on top of it, you find yourself in Shining Needle Castle. So get ready for this one because it's a doozy. You remember when I talked about the World of Envy in Shin Megami Tensei If? After the mind-numbing hell that was the World of Sloth, the shit this dungeon throws at you will make you ejaculate because it at least stimulates your brain a little bit. You got dark rooms, pitfalls, slip and slide bullshit. It's all here and man, you're gonna like it. Hard to believe that was 4 years ago. In that stage, you gotta deal with something I called slip and slide bullshit. That's where you step on a tile, lose all control of your character, and go flying across the room until you land somewhere else. This dungeon loves slip and slide bullshit. It's like the slip and slide emporium. You have to make it through 3 floors. The first one, not bad. There's some sliding tiles here and there, but you're not likely to have much trouble with it. The second floor looks like this. And the third floor, I think this one rivals the Moon Palace for amount of time spent trying to figure it out. For some people, this shit just clicks, or you get lucky, and you can make it through it fast. If you're not one of those people, this can be a brutal stage. There are no midway checkpoints or anything. You can save at the start of the level, but that's it. Now, you do have options to mitigate this. Let's say you need a dip in the middle of this fun fest and take a breather. You can use a magic thread, which teleports you back to the last anomaly you were at, or a memory ball. Memory balls are really expensive, single-use items where you can designate a spot anywhere in a dungeon and teleport back to it later. So if you have the money, what you can do is buy a memory ball, play half the stage, set your teleporter point, warp out with a magic thread, resupply, and then warp back with the memory ball to pick up where you left off. It can get pretty costly to do this, but it's one of those stages where I think it's worth going through the trouble for your sanity. Something else to note about this dungeon that has absolutely nothing to do with the gameplay is that we seem to be walking on the ceiling, and the floor is above us. The entire building is actually upside down, and I was honestly so caught up in the dungeon crawling that I didn't even notice it until I was almost done with the stage. The boss of this place is Seija, an evil yokai. She seems to know Sumireko already from some other game, and the two decide to have a friendly battle. Does anybody in this universe ever just meet up for coffee or something? We don't have to beat each other up. Whatever. Seija's weak to ice, which meant Kisume and Keiki were able to deal significant damage to her. She often attacks with Magnum Shot, a powerful pierce attack that my frontliner, Shinmyo Maru, was immune to. I had a pretty good setup here and was able to counter most of her nasty attacks. The most important thing you need to worry about in this fight is Social Distortion, Seija's special move. This move swaps stat changes with its target. So let's say I debuff Seija's attack 3 times. If she uses Social Distortion, now my attack is debuffed, and if I had any buffs applied to myself, she gets those. This can ruin your day if it takes you off guard. You'll either want to avoid using buffs altogether, or just be ready to clear everything as soon as that move drops. If you want to be funny, you can also find Seija's sleeper in this dungeon and use it against her, which is pretty cool. Social Distortion is actually one of the most important moves in the game if you're aiming to complete everything, and you'll know exactly what I mean by that pretty soon. Would definitely advise picking it up when you can. When Seija's finished, we learn that she has an active bounty on her head, and we decide to capture her and bring her to Reimu. we leave the dungeon and go all the way back to Hakurei Shrine just to find out that damn bounty expired a long time ago. Back at the castle, we're then attacked by the real Shinmyo Maru. You actually instantly get warped to where this fight takes place, but if you die, you have to replay the entire stage to get back to it. So don't die. This is definitely a more magic-leaning fight. Shinmyo Maru has a move that allows all physical damage to be reflected. She's weak to electric and ice. Overall, it's much easier than Seiya, but if you show up here with low MP, you might find yourself running out of steam before you can get the job done. Once you pull this off, we can finally bid the castle farewell as we take our photo and release Seiya. Seiya vows to cause more trouble and reacquire her bounty, and we're free to go. There's actually only one key location left in the main game before we're on to the final parts of the Monolith and the last boss. I flew around for a while, really scanning everything and trying to spot anything different, and while I didn't find our last dungeon right away, I did find a couple of pretty neat things. First up, there's a hidden boss fight on top of a snowy mountain. It's against Tenchi, a heavenly being from the stars. She can attack 3 times in the same turn, but as long as you keep her debuffed, it's no trouble. Beating Tenchi rewards you with a permanent +2 to every stat. There's also the Tanuki Forest, found to the west of Scarlet Devil Mansion. It's a simple small dungeon with some unique enemies, and a secret shop owned by Mamizo, who sells some incredibly expensive yet extremely powerful gear. If you got money coming out your ass for some reason, this is like the best shit in the entire game, so definitely consider taking advantage of it. I can hardly believe what I'm about to say, but this reminded me of Last Bible Special. There's a shop much like this in that game, and I was instantly reminded of it in here. After the forest, I searched and searched, and eventually did find our final stage, Torifune, this structure sitting in a small patch of sand. Apparently, this thing is a crashed satellite. It's really dark in here, the walls are all rusted up, it almost feels like a horror segment. The music is badass and a little creepy too. Some of the enemies in here are insane, like this Sigma eyeball. The fuck is the story with this thing? Even the hijacks can be crazy, like this one with all the crosses descending onto you. Most of the doors you come by are locked, at least until you find a power generator that turns the lights back on and allows you to actually progress through the stage. So, I wonder if you can guess the gimmick on this level. It's something that usually shows up in SMT games, and I haven't spoken about it yet. Any ideas? No? Well, it's Pitfalls. This place has 3 floors, one of which is a basement where you'll end up if you step on one. The best strategy I could come up with is to pray to all world deities that I didn't find any. Some of them are placed in out-of-the-way spots like corners, but there are a few smack in the middle of hallways, and man, it really blows sack if they get you. In addition to the pitfalls, you'll also have to avoid some orbs, but you should be well familiar with that by now. At the top of the dungeon is a destroyed Shinto shrine, where we're attacked by the Chimera. This is a straight up fucking monster. Why is it not some girl who wants to backtalk me? What's even more bizarre is that he's really easy. This is the most threatening looking boss in the game, easily, and there's not much to it. If you could get through Shining Needle Castle, this should be a total joke. When he goes down, all that's left is to wrap up the Dreamer's Monolith. With these 3 dungeons under our belt, floors 6 through 10 are ready for us to explore. Make sure you're ready before the final encounter. You gotta stock up on items, perform any last minute fusions, transfer over any useful moves you might want, and maybe say hi to Aku if you have time. I'm gonna miss her so much. The last battle is fast approaching. Let's lock in and get this shit finished. Floors 6 through 8 are nothing you haven't seen before. More orbs and hidden door puzzles. But when you reach 9, the entire thing is invisible on your map. There is no way to make this floor show up on your radar, as far as I can tell. There are a lot of twists and turns on this floor. It's definitely designed to get your ass lost, and it's pretty good at it. I can't believe I'm saying this, but here we go. If you're having trouble, you might want to bust out a piece of paper and draw a map yourself. Look, these games can get pretty crazy, and sometimes you have to get down to business. This is some wizardry shit right here. Amidst all the confusion making my way up here, I had a strange encounter with Yukuri, who looks like Reimu's disembodied head turned into a marketable plushie or something. It blocks every element except for ice, and when it went down, it dropped a lot of money in XP. I'm guessing the element it's weak to changes with every battle, but if you run into one of these, try your best to beat it for an easy chunk of change. When you reach floor 10, you'll know you're at the top because the entire place turns golden and you get a save spot. You ready to solve this thing? Head down a very long hallway, pass through a door, and inside, we're greeted by ourselves. Another Sumireko appears and starts talking about how cringe it is that she has to limit her powers here in Gensokyo just to make Reimu happy. When we ask this weird clone of Sumireko who she is, she says that she's our dream self, and that she started this incident to regain her full power. We were sent into all of those dungeons to gather strength, and now that we've conquered everything, we can finally kick Reimu's ass. To be honest, I think it'd be kinda cool to see that, but we do need to stop her. When we object to her plan, the Dream Sumireko completely drains our phone and removes all of our allies. Just as it looks like we're gonna have to do an old-fashioned 1v1 on top of the tower at midnight, Yukari busts in and stands by our side. Dream Sumireko vows to eradicate both of us, and what appears to be the final battle begins. I know what you're thinking, right? Really? A 2v1? After all that time I spent gearing up my team, Kisame in particular, and we can't even use them? What's really going on here? Well, there's only one way to find out. Sumireko is you. Her strengths and weaknesses match yours. As long as you know what you're weak to and have some way of exploiting that, the fight is dead simple. Yukari can provide support in the form of healing, buff cancellation, and a couple of attacks, making her basically a jack of all trades to assist whatever build you're running. Trade some hits back and forth, keep your health up, and in no time at all, Sumireko goes down. We snap a victory selfie on the roof of the monolith, and Yukari informs us that this place won't stand for much longer without our dream self powering it. Yukari asks to meet us over at Hakure's shrine, but something seems off, and we're given the option to ask if she is the true culprit. Check this out. Remember back at Genbu Ravine when I said Nitori and her database collection were really important? That all comes into play right now. If you have less than 50% of your sleeper database complete, you aren't given a very good reason for your accusation towards Yukari. All you can say is that she's mad sus, which doesn't hold much water, and after that, she and Reimu decide to ban you from Gensokyo, explaining that you've caused too much trouble. This is what the game refers to as Ending B. Not very satisfying. I mean, we barely even got a good final boss, and we know Yukari has something to do with the mystery, but we can't put our finger on why. This is actually the ending I got initially, and I knew something was wrong, so I set out to fix it. If you think raising your sleeper database completion to 50% sounds hard, really, it's not. If you want to build up progress fast, revisit some old dungeons, go on a little hijacking marathon, and after you register your new allies, fuse them afterwards to get even more new characters. In like 30 minutes to an hour, you can have this done, no sweat. Once you have 50%, talk to Nitori at Genbu Ravine, and she'll say that thanks to our help, she's been able to look at the sleeper's coding. Each of the clones has a digital signature from someone named Ron Y. Once you have this key piece of information, and you beat Dream Sumireko, then you unlock a new dialogue option where you can ask Yukari about the signature. Yukari explains that this name refers to Ron Yakumo, her Shikigami. When we tell her that Ron's name appears in the sleeper's coding, Yukari drops the act and gets serious. Our party is restored, and we're teleported into a hellish world where eyes stare at us from the abyss surrounding us. Yukari welcomes us to this place where time stands still, and admits she was the one behind the incident, as well as the one who sent us all of the text messages. The story told to us by Dream Sumireko was all a lie, and she wasn't our true form at all. That was our sleeper. When we ask why she was able to speak, Yukari says that all sleepers can talk and do anything their real self can, but she forced all of them into silence. Yukari says that sleepers are digital copies created by her hand and controlled by her Shikigami. Our phone allows us to control them by overriding the coding. The whole point of this incident was to give us a fun summer break before being banished from Gensokyo. Yukari says we're a dangerous person, and on top of that, she's not happy with the way we let ourselves rot in the real world. She thinks it's best if we leave and get on with our real life, even having Reimu in on the plan, as we saw in Ending B. The culprit literally being us was the perfect cliché ending to this artificial incident, but what she didn't account for was that we might actually expose the true villain. Shit. I mean, it's hard to hate Yukari for what she's saying. She has a point. It's not really right for us to completely abandon the real world for Gensokyo, and she was even nice enough to give us this whole adventure as one final send-off. But she is being a little unfair here, right? We should be able to choose how we spend our life. And sure, we might cause some trouble, but if all the other characters are anything to go by, that kinda seems normal here. As the dialogue draws to a close, Yukari admits that this incident was a big mistake, and that she should have just done away with us as soon as possible. Her face grows grim, and she declares that our dream has come to an end. And here it is, the moment you've been waiting for. Yukari is a monster, and if you lose here, you gotta reload a save all the way back at the tower before all that dialogue. The stakes are high, and there's little room for fuck-ups. But we can do this. Yukari, as you'd expect, casts incredibly powerful magic. Pierce attacks heal her, which was a big problem for my team that loved to use them. She also has a strange special move called Master of Reality that can swap your HP and MP values. And on top of that, she has a move that flat out removes an ally from your active party and sends them back to your stock. And she attacks 3 times in 1 turn. That's a lot of stuff to deal with. My party was made up of Rika, Yumemi, and Kisume. Kisume and myself were basically on full support duty, and the 2 up front were on full attack. Yukari has 8,000 HP, which means you need to settle in for the long haul. It's an exhausting battle that demands constant attention and usage of your best spells. You're going to be throwing out debuffs, buffs, healing, canceling shit out, attacking. It's very MP heavy, so hopefully you have some restoratives to keep you fueled up throughout. I've noticed that sometimes Master of Reality can help you if your HP is high and your MP is low. HP is very easy to recover, MP isn't, so as long as you can pull off a heal quick enough, that spell can actually serve to refresh your party and keep you going. In terms of length, this fight reminded me a lot of Hazuma's final form in Shin Megami Tensei If. This was like a 15-minute battle for me, a true test to see whether you've mastered the game's mechanics and can keep pace with someone who's frankly way stronger than you. I know Kisume had some blunders along the way, but I think we all need to celebrate the fact that she's here. I brought her from that lowly underworld cave all the way to the edges of time, and she was integral in getting this fight done, saving me time and time again with her healing. Close to the end of the battle, my team basically reached a stalemate against Yukari. She would send someone back to the stock, I would resummon them, heal, maybe fire off 1 attack. This just kept repeating round after round. Sometimes she'd buff herself, and I'd have to counter that too. It was like there was no way for me to get ahead. It was really frustrating. She was definitely trying to psych me out. Bite hard, spare no expense with your items, and keep focused. After a long, bloody battle, Yukari eventually gives in. She stares hard at us, exasperated, and pleads with us to understand that we can't stay in Gensokyo if we value our humanity. Sumireko's response is a compromise. She asks to stay until the end of summer break. Lightening up a bit, Yukari says that we have until the end of August to hang around here. She offers us light praise for solving the incident, and decides to leave the sleepers and the monolith active until we leave, suggesting we tie up any loose ends before the month is over. So we did it. This is ending A, and what it does is continue the game. Technically, you could be done here, but all that work we did to gain Yukari's approval means we can play the post-game. Summer break may be almost over, but holy shit, if you think you've seen the craziest artificial dream in Arcadia has to offer, you have no idea. First, pat yourself on the back for getting this far. We solved the incident, beat a shitload of dungeons, and had a lot of fun. Now, if you're gonna play the post-game, punch yourself in the face. No, seriously, do it. Yeah, you feel that? Did it hurt? Well, I bet it didn't hurt as much as this is about to. The post-game does not fuck around. This is where masochists come when they want to cry. This part is the game's ultimate challenge, and one of the most memorable segments I've played in a game in years. When I say it's painful, I mean that in the best way possible. This is devious shit for people that love dungeon crawlers. After finishing the fight with Yukari, head over to Hakure's shrine, and Reimu gives us permission to explore a cave behind the place that's been blocked off since the game started. We're warned that this cave was sealed off for a reason, but hey, we can spend break however we want. Stroll on over and get ready. God's light won't find you now. The ensuing dungeons make even the worst of what we've done so far look like a poo-poo baby playground. First up, we've got the sealed cave. You get one save spot right at the start, and there isn't another one for a really long time. I'd highly suggest coming in here with memory balls to create your own checkpoints, or you're gonna be ripping your hair out. Let me give you the lowdown. This place is a path that leads to the Makai, the demon world. Even the healer's a demon now. You'll notice the difficulty of random encounters shoots way up in here, and this is the easy part. It's just a cave. We haven't even seen the gimmicks yet. Do your best with the fights, hijacking whenever you can to swipe some new allies. I wouldn't blame you if you decided to grind a little bit next to the entrance. Grinding is never required, but having higher stats never hurt anybody either. After a long, roundabout series of twists and turns, you'll finish the cave and immediately find yourself in another dungeon, the Ruins of Vina. Even after all the shit you fought through to get here, you still don't get a save point. I did say it would be a while, remember? The Ruins of Vina consist of 2 floors, each containing poison tiles scattered throughout. The second floor is composed of massive corridors that all kinda blend together. In terms of good sleepers, you can pick up Yukari in the caves, and we already know how strong she is. You can also find Louise here in the ruins. Louise became a post-game favorite because her move list contains most of the game's elements, and she has a high reserve of health and magic. To be honest, if you see Louise and aren't heavily opposed to it for some reason, I'd say you should just keep her as a permanent team member for the rest of the game, even if she's just in the stock as a backup fighter. She's that versatile. Close to the end of the ruins, you have a boss fight against Sarah, who guards the entrance to the Makai. She's not too hard, but she does pop up in the middle of a corridor, which, if you haven't seen this video, is going to surprise you, which can be pretty bad if you haven't healed yourself up in a while. She'll try to debuff you a good bit, and she's weak to pierce. Pretty standard stuff overall. Only after Sarah goes down are you finally given a moment to breathe. The Makai has a friendly city in it and looks like a green chocolate chip cookie, kinda like in Digital Devil Story 2. Down here in the Makai, you can save, teleport back home if necessary, buy supplies, the whole 9 yards. We learned from some fairy here that the capital G God would like to speak to us. I'm guessing it's not gonna be like the Shin Megami Tensei one, but on the off chance it is a giant yellow head, I'll actually shit my pants. God can be found deep inside the fortress Pandemonium. Of course, the gates to Pandemonium are locked, and we can only gain access by proving ourselves in 2 additional dungeons. To the east, we have an ice-themed temple, and to the west, a fire-themed temple. I'm gonna be straight up, the ice one is way more annoying, so let's save that for last. Alright, Fallen Temple West. You step in and your skin melts off. Every step you take in here hurts you pretty good. It's a big dungeon on top of that with 2 floors, meaning this is a gimmick you need to take pretty seriously and constantly monitor your health. Having backup healers in your stock is a good idea. It may seem like common sense to say this, but ice does really well in here against the enemies. If you come up in here with a wide variety of ice attacks and resist fire, you'll have a much better chance of success. I don't recall that being the case with any of the previous stages. Usually you have a lot of stuff being thrown at you, but in here, at least in my experience, it was mostly fire. Kisame in particular shined down here because she's naturally immune to fire and, as we know, has some ice moves. You know what they say about bringing a bucket to the Makai, right? Because I sure fucking don't. When you get to the top of this place, provided you haven't melted into a puddle, you have to face off against Yuki, who demands we face her if we wish to see God. Surprise, she's one of the easiest bosses in the game, if you're immune to fire. Practically none of her attacks had any effect on me, and we honestly wiped the floor with her. When she goes down, she threatens that you'll have to fight her sister Mai next, and I was honestly a little afraid that we'd have to do a second boss right away with no break, but what Yuki means is that Mai is over in the Ice Temple. You had me going there for a second. Okay, so the Eastern Temple. The Western one drained our health. This one, yup, drains our MP. So much worse. Really, kinda cruel. Like I said earlier, MP is way harder to replace than HP, so you're either gonna have to leave the dungeon if you run out, roll around with a backup team, or just burn through rare items to restore it. The route to the stairs is ridiculously convoluted. The floors themselves aren't big, but you're going around them like a rat in the most complicated tube maze ever conceived. The only consolation here is that this place is elementally uniform like the other temple. If you come in here with fire attacks and resist ice, many of the encounters and the boss become disgustingly simple. Mai is a piece of cake. She can paralyze you, but that's really the only thing noteworthy about her. After each of the temples are done, these two still haven't had their fun, and challenge us to a rematch at the gates to Pandemonium. Here, you might think now you need to resist fire and ice at the same time. The truth is, Mai doesn't really attack that much, so if you just gear yourself up to fight Yuki, you'll still be avoiding most of the damage. Focus fire Mai just to get her out of the way, and then whittle down Yuki. Not bad. When the two finally relent, they remark on how long it's been since Pandemonium has had a human visitor, and tell us to say hi to someone named Yumiko. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Pandemonium, probably the single most difficult dungeon I've shown on this channel. Get a load of this shit. We don't have to wait long to find out who Yumiko is because we're greeted by her as soon as we walk in. She tells us this is the home of Lady Shinki and says that we are trash that she's going to take out. Yumiko then disappears into the fortress. Where'd she go? Well, step on in, turn to the side, and hello! Yumiko is this big orb that chases you throughout the dungeon. It follows your ass to the ends of the earth. Your only shot of shaking it is to pass through a door, because it can't use those. But it has perfect knowledge of the dungeon's layout, and she can be pretty good at cornering you in a spot with no escape. If Yumiko catches you on this floor, you're booted from the dungeon, no questions asked. All while you're being chased, you have to deal with some of the most awe-inspiring Touhou designs I've ever seen. The Angel Sariel? Whatever the hell is this? But check this out. You think the first floor sounds pretty tough, right? Some of you are probably like, I don't know, Marshall, not that bad, buddy. Yeah, well, look at this. After you pass the initial chase scene with Yumiko, you go up to floor 2. Up here, it's pitfalls again, except this time, you want to fall in the pitfalls, but you don't know which one, and there are so many of them. You don't get it. Like, that's crazy. There are over 20 pitfalls, and you just gotta try each one or compare your map of the first and second floor and try to calculate where the right one might be. Even if you have a general idea of where you need to fall, the correct pitfall will be hidden near like 3 or 4 others that are there to fake you out. It's brutal because each time you fuck up, you gotta work your way all the way back. The deeper you go, the stranger the battles get, and there are still 2 more deadly gimmicks to deal with. Eventually, you reach the basement of Pandemonium, and it's another orb segment. You have to navigate a maze with pretty narrow hallways and try to stay out of the way of the orbs until the end. If they touch you in here, one of your team members just dies. It picks at random. This is pretty scary to be sure, but I was honestly thankful it didn't boot me back outside. If you can get through here, the last floor of the game awaits. This is the lower stratum of Pandemonium. Like the 9th floor of the Monolith, the tiles can't be seen on the map. There are tons of twisty hallways and doors, as well as one-way doors that will completely ruin your sense of direction if you pass through them. This is pretty much like a worst-case scenario dungeon to not have a map. If you don't draw yourself something, you're gonna be lost as shit and the encounters are gonna wear you down. And even if you do reach the end, you still have to fight Yumiko in a real battle as she warns that Lady Shinki's room is just ahead. Yumiko has mountains of health and a versatile move list. Even if you're blasting away at her weaknesses, electricity and mind, it's still an absolute endurance round. Yumiko has a crazy move called Bullet Hell that hits the entire team for severe pierce damage, and she can focus her attacks to deal more damage. Good healers can keep this at bay, but like I said, it's a long fight, so you need to pace yourself when it comes to MP, or bring a lot of restoratives with you. If you think this is a tough endurance round, what comes next will blow your mind. Just past Yumiko is a save point. If I told you how excited this made me, I'd probably get banned from YouTube. At the very least, if we die on what's coming up next, we can start from here. You'll notice I said, if we die. It's more like, after we die. Listen, if you watch this whole thing and got this far with me, and especially if you get this far in your own game, you're pretty real. Unfortunately, I have to tell you though, this next boss killed me in real life. Step through one last door, and it's time to party like summer break is never gonna end. We're met by who else but Shinki, creator and god of the Makai. She tells us that she's heard about the sleeper incident, and tells us she doesn't mind it, saying that even gods become bored. She asks why we've come here, and we tell her that we're hanging out on summer break. Recognizing that we've beaten Yumiko, she says that if we wish to fight a god, that's exactly what we'll get. This boss. Wow. Shinki has 25,000 health, spells of every element, and some insane resistances. Do you see this shit? Here's how this fight works. Shinki has a special move called Paradise Lost that she casts right when the battle starts, and then every 6 turns after that. Paradise Lost debuffs you completely, everything down to the lowest it will go, and buffs all of her attributes the highest they can go. If you get hit in this state, it is devastating and has a good chance of ending your attempt. Every time Paradise Lost is cast, Shinki's weakness changes. As you saw in that footage, Shinki's one weakness is the only way you can do any damage. Everything else just gets absorbed. What this means is, you have to manually keep track of how many turns have passed, and remember to analyze her to check what her weakness has changed to. And you need to have that buff situation under control immediately. With all these details in mind, your party needs to be decked the fuck out to be able to reliably deal damage and survive long enough to knock down, again, for dramatic effect, 25,000 health. You want to have each of your team members set up with as many elements as possible to cover all of your bases. If Shinki switches to an element that nobody can use, you're just stuck there taking hits until she changes again. I think there's some kind of special ability that lets you bypass enemy resistances, but let's say you have that. Well, you're still going to be fighting for a really long time if you can't hit the thing she's actually weak to. You'll want each of your allies to have as high agility stats as you can manage. If you can get your agility to the 60s or 70s, you can act before most things in this game, including this boss. If you're having trouble with a buff situation, well, there is one secret weapon we can use to turn the tables. Remember the fight with Seiji and her special move, Social Distortion? You remember what that does, right? It swaps your buff status with the enemy. That shit goes insane on this fight. So whether you bring Seiji up to the 70s or fuse the move onto somebody else, you should probably have it ready when Paradise Lost comes out. I told you it was important, but even with this up your sleeve, it's still pretty challenging. You see how strong Kisame is in this fight? Do you know I sacrificed everyone who ever lived to get this? I turned her into the ultimate creation, capable of fighting against gods from inside of a wooden bucket. I think it's fair to say this should be a canon event, right? Real shit, this is no joke. If you can beat this, you've mastered the game. When Shinki goes down, she thanks you for the fun, and then Yukari reminds you of your deal and prepares to send you back to the real world. To give people who intend to play this something to look forward to, since this game is newer, I'm gonna leave out the very final cutscene. I just told you basically what happens, but there's a pretty funny picture at the end you get for achieving ending C. This is one of the best dungeon crawlers I've ever played. Ranking it alongside Megaten games, I'd easily give this an A tier, up there with the classics. It perfectly brings over the style of that golden age of SMT, while introducing great new mechanics that fit right in. You could have told me old Atlas staff did make this game, and I would totally believe it. It's that faithful in all the right ways. The balance on everything to me was perfect. Encounter rates felt appropriate based on the area, combat was fair, and you have plenty of ways to modify it to your own taste. Sure, some of the post-game dungeons are absolutely insane and require incredible patience, but I'd argue any dungeon crawler post-game should feel like that. It's the ultimate test of your ability to overcome overwhelming odds. Those pitfalls are pretty damn annoying, though. The only thing I would have liked to see more of, maybe, was branching choices. I'm talking about that one boss fight at the Primate Spirit Garden where you can switch sides at the very end. That was neat. Maybe if there's ever a sequel one day, we could see an expanded version of that. Seriously, I really struggle to find any issues. It's a game for a niche audience, and it does an excellent job. My playthrough was a bit over 40 hours long, which is quite a lot of content. If you've ever wanted to play an older first-person Megaten but thought it looked too dated or something, this game is an excellent entry point. Thanks for watching to the end if you made it this far. If you've played this game, or maybe you're a Touhou fan and need to educate me on something, feel free. I love reading the comments and seeing your guys' stories with things. This has been the Artificial Dream in Arcadia experience, and I'll see you guys in the next video.